Hello everyone and welcome to today's form building webinar. My name is Nick and I'll be walking us through the builder today. Today we'll be going over conditional formatting and how to use those conditional questions. And if you do have any questions as we go along, please hold on to those and keep them at the ready. I will be opening up that chat just a little bit later in the webinar. In the meantime, let's go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and go down to our packets and forms page, and we'll be working off of our FormDr training packet today. So we'll go ahead and click the three dots on the right side of that, and we'll click Edit Forms. This will take us into step one of the builder where we can add or remove any tabs to this packet. However, I've already added a tab for us to work off of today, just a simple scratch tab, which will be a blank area for us to build out a custom form. We'll go ahead and click Next to Build to take us into the builder. And all we have here on this tab is a patient name widget. That's simply going to be needed at least once in each packet, as the name entered in the first and last name fields is going to be the name that submission is stored under in the send and receive page and in the records page. All packets will need this widget at least once in each packet, so just keep that in mind. You won't be able to publish the packet without including that. But okay, let's go ahead and add a conditional question, and we'll just talk about that for a moment. Or a single select option. And this will be your typical element that's used as a conditional, your simple yes or no type question. You can also see this in a drop-down as well, as either one of these are just going to allow for a single selection to be made by the patient. Conditional information is just going to be any additional information that is presented when a certain answer is selected. So let's just, for example, we'll have this question ask, is the patient a minor? And we'll just have the answers be yes or no. Now, what you can do with the conditional formatting is present the same information regardless of the selection, but present additional information depending on that answer. In this case, we'll go ahead and add some demographic information, just simple text field questions, and then we'll add a parental consent if the patient selects yes. So we'll just start off by adding a column. Now, to add conditional information, you'll notice I just clicked and dragged into the answer area where it says drag and drop form elements here. This will let you know that there is nothing currently in that area and nothing will be presented if the no answer is selected. Above that, we have hide conditional fields, which presented itself as soon as I dropped that column widget into that open area. And now we can hide that section. If you do open a conditional question that does have conditional information, it is going to default to look just like this. It will say show conditional fields, and you'll need to click that to open up the area to get into the information within. Now you can format within this area as well, and if we do not format that, if we were to just add some text fields in here, then they would stack on top of each other, taking up the entirety of that answer area. We can go ahead and take a look at that by going over to the style page and selecting the yes answer. And we can see our conditional questions here taking up the full width of the area that it's been given, and they are stacking on top of each other. So that is not a formatted area by default. However, we can use formatting tools to improve that. So we'll just drag our column to the top, and we'll go ahead and drag our text fields into the column. Now they'll be displayed on the same row, and I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate a couple more of these just to simulate a section of information. Now when we go back to the style page and we select that yes answer, that information will look a lot nicer and it will be more appropriate for the amount of information we'll be collecting in each one of those answers, or answer fields, I should say. But let's go ahead and go back, and now we'll add that same section to our no answer, because regardless of whether the patient is a minor or an adult, let's just say this is phone number, email, social security, address, date of birth, and sex or gender, or something like that. Just in the interest of saving time, I'm not going to flesh each one of these out. We'll just kind of build out the structure of these sections in lieu of that. So what I'm going to do here, or what I've just done, is I've hovered over the column widget itself with all of the text fields within. I've selected the orange pencil icon to open it for editing. And here you'll have the ability to update the amount of elements per row. It will always default to 3. However, you can go all the way out to 9, depending on how you want that information presented. But just for the consistency and cleanliness, we'll leave it at 3. And all I've done here is use the duplicate function to duplicate this entire column and the information within as well. So we have a second section here, and we're just going to click and drag this section to our no answer selection. And so now it will not matter which option the patient selects, they will be presented with both sets of the same information. Now, we may need additional information depending on if that patient is a minor. So maybe we'll go ahead and add a paragraph widget as a section header, and we'll type parental information, and we'll use that heading style to bring that up a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and add a few fields here. Maybe we're asking for the parent's name and contact information. We'll just leave it like this for now. This is just a visual thing for my computer whenever I start Zoom. These will be in a 2-column format once we get back into that style page. And then we'll go ahead and add a paragraph widget for a parental consent. We'll also up that to heading style 3. And then we'll just enter some placeholder information. This is a consent form. And we'll just copy and paste this several times just to simulate a paragraph. All right, there we go. Just a sample. And then we'll go ahead and add our parental signature. Parent, guardian. All right. And now we're good to go. So we'll collect that patient information regardless of the selection. However, if the patient does select yes, that they are a minor, then we will also get that parental information. So we can select no for an adult and then yes for a minor. We can see that 2-column format with our parental consent and our signature. And so now, depending on how that patient answers, we can get several different sets of information. You can nest this as well, so we could put this entire question inside of another question asking another qualifying question. So you can really have the forms branch out, and it will really be dependent up to your creativity and sanity in terms of how much you want to dive into those deep conditional questions. But that can be done, and it can also really help you out in terms of getting the most out of your packets. If you do have, say a Spanish and an English packet, but they both are the same otherwise, there are a couple ways of doing that, titling the questions in both languages, of course. And then I would recommend, if you don't want to do that, in that case, adding a qualifying question of what language they would like that form to be in, and then having that information presented based on their selection. Also see this in male and female forms. Minor forms is typically the most common, but there will be opportunities to kind of branch out through that and give you more ability to collect that information. Now I would like to talk a little bit about the formatting of the conditional information. We did talk about that at the base level in these areas here. And again, this will be unformatted unless you have added those columns or formatting tools. And at that point, you'll then be able to format however you like within there. However, this is, if we go back to the style page, taking up the full width of that answer information because we have our parent question on its own line that's not being formatted or not in a column widget. Now, what I mean by that is if we were to set a column, place our minor question in there, and then maybe we have a few other questions that we're asking the patient in that same area. Well, now this parent question is only given 1/3 of the page, which means that any conditional information that follows it is also only going to be given 1/3 of that page. So please keep that in mind if you are going to have a bunch of information inside of a single question, a conditional question. In a situation like this, I would just recommend bringing this minor question out to its own line to allow for all of that information to breathe, and that way you won't have it all crammed together in a fraction of the area that it may need. You'll notice too that this will make your form a lot longer than you may intend it to be, especially if these two questions do not have any conditional information behind them. What can end up happening if these two are not required, the patient will work their way through this information here, go down, sign that last field, and then move on to the next question, because they won't see that these questions are up here, or they may have forgotten by the time they get down through this conditional information, and then they'll just move on, not completing this information. So if you do want to set the form up this way, and this is not a problem for you, that's totally fine. I just recommend requiring the two questions that follow something with lots of conditional information, just to ensure that those questions don't go unanswered. All right. So again, here, as it's only given 1/3, the conditional information will also only be given 1/3. So what I had recommended before was to just pull this out onto its own line and just let it breathe out there. This will ensure that all of those conditional fields get as much area as they can, and the patient will have a lot more room to fill that out, especially if you are using PDF or paper forms. As we know, everybody's handwriting is vastly different, and so when it does come to PDF forms, if you are using them as printouts for in-office use, I always recommend giving the patient as much space as possible for each of those questions, just so you don't run into someone with very large handwriting and they struggle to get an appropriate amount of information onto that form. All right. And so this is just the single select option. Everything that we've talked about here will hold true for the drop-down widget as well. These two will, again, only allow for one single selection to be made. They will just be presented in two separate formats. Now, if we wanted to change this into a drop-down, you can absolutely do that. You won't need to place a drop-down and rebuild the question. We can just open that up, use the field type selection here, which will open a drop-down, and you can change it from element types. So now we can turn that into a drop-down if we wanted, or back to our single select, or if we wanted the patient to be able to answer both questions. Wouldn't really apply to this specific question, but we could change that to a multi-select option, which would allow for multiple selections and deselections. But in the interest of clarity, we'll just leave this to be a single select option. So the single select and drop-downs will function exactly the same. And again, all conditional information will be presented directly beneath that parent question. And then we also have the ability to use conditional formatting with our multi-select option, multi-checkbox, single checkbox, and signature widgets. We'll talk about the single checkbox and the signature widgets first, as I will be deleting these here in just a moment, and we will get into the multi-select and multi-checkboxes. However, the single checkbox and the signature widget both will need to have their conditional formatting enabled. So we'll click the orange pencil icon, we'll open that up, and we'll scroll down to where that conditional area should be, and we'll see that it has a conditional toggle. We'll need to enable that toggle, and then our conditional area will be presented to us. We can then go in and add whatever we need. We can close that up. Same is going to hold for the signature. So we can open that up, scroll down, we'll have a conditional toggle that we will need to enable. However, once we have enabled that and added our conditional information, as soon as that signature field has been completed, that conditional information will be presented. Okay, now the multi-select option and the multi-checkbox both will allow for conditional information in very much the same way that the single selected drop-downs do. However, again, this will be able to have multiple selections rather than just one. So let's go ahead and add a few extra options here, and we'll take a look at how these will display differently. We'll add 10 for our multi-select option, and we'll add 10 for our our multiple checkboxes as well. All right, and we can just take a look at how these are going to look different on the page. We'll get rid of that drop down because we won't need it today. All right, we can go over to the style page and take a look at those. And here we have our multi-select option, and our multiple checkboxes. These will be personal preference on how you want that information to be displayed. However, while they function very, very similar, there are some subtle differences. Now, as you notice, the multi-select is putting all 10 of those options on the same row, whereas our multiple checkboxes is stopping at 7 and adding the rest of the options on the second line. The multi-select option will automatically format to try to save as much space on the form as possible. However long your answer is, that box will grow out to that answer size. That will also be the same for the single select option as well, by the way. But we can test that here. We can see that that is going to grow a little bit until you've completed that. But it will just keep everything nice and tight and try to take up as little room as possible. The multi-check boxes will default to 7 per row. However, you can also toggle on the Show as Columns toggle. When this is enabled, you will gain that conditional formatting. So we can see that we can set that columns number very much like the column widget, and it will go all the way out up to 9. This will allow you to format this a little bit differently just to make things look a little bit nicer if that is what you're looking for, and if you're not looking to save room, although this one does not take up a lot of room either. We can see that here. But let's go ahead and add some conditional information, and let's take a look at how these are going to display differently. So we'll add some text fields in here. 1, 2, 3. The first 3 and the last 3 is all we're going to do today. Just save us some time. A few precious seconds. All right, and same for the multi-check boxes. Okay, let's go back over to the style page and take a look. Now, again, whenever an element has conditional information, it will always be presented directly beneath the parent question itself. So that means when we select option 1, option 2, option 3 for our multi-select options, that information will be presented directly beneath. Now you will notice as we select all of these out, these are not formatted onto the same line. They are taking up the entirety of the space that they are given. And that is because, again, this is one element with multiple answer selections. Each one of those answer selections having conditional information. There won't be a way to format that information other than this. So if you are wanting to save space, and this is also something to keep in mind if you are printing out forms for in-office use, because all conditional information will be presented on that PDF. So all of these will automatically be out for the patient. And the same will be, it will be the same for the multiple checkboxes as well. So we can see we select these out and they will be presented very much the same. So if you are going to create a section that you want to offer the patient multiple selections, but those selections might all have conditional information, whether that be please explain, or you're collecting dates for those ailments, whatever the case may be, then I would recommend setting up a section one of 2 ways. Especially if you're dealing with conditional information, this section will look a lot better for you on that printed version and on your exported document or exported submissions than either one of these will if you have a lot of conditional information. Now, if you only have a few conditional fields, that's not really a big deal to have a couple that are going to be, taking up that much room. However, if you have 3 or more, I typically would recommend setting up the section in this manner instead. So we'll go ahead and do that right now. And we'll add a columns widget. And I do know that we are running a little bit short on time, so I'll go ahead and open up that chat now, and if there are any questions, please feel free to get those in while I'm going over this, and I'll be happy to answer those as soon as I have completed this section. But all right, so we'll add a column widget, and now for this I'm going to add either a single select option and just do a series of yes or no's with that conditional information, or what we can also do is just do the single checkbox instead. And to make this easier for myself, so I don't have to open that up, toggle on the conditional, add my conditional information, and then add another single checkbox and do all that over and over and over again for 10 different questions. What I'll do instead is I'll open my single checkbox, I'll add my conditional information, and then I'm just going to duplicate this, and it will duplicate this entire question, and I'll duplicate it 9 times so that we'll have 10 selections. All right. So now we have our 10 single checkboxes, all of which will have conditional information. Let's go ahead and reformat that column to 5 wide so that it looks a little bit more like our multiple checkboxes. And let's go back over to the style page. So we can see how all 3 of these are going to look a little bit different. And while these do take up less room on that live version of the form, it is only just a little bit less room. However, again, the way the conditional information is going to be presented is going to be vastly different between these 2 styles. Because, as all conditional information will be presented beneath the parent question, in this section of our single checkboxes, these are all individual widgets, meaning each one of their conditional information will be presented directly beneath that question. It will not be confusing to the patient as to what question that information is coming from. And also, on that printout or printed version, it's going to look like this as opposed to this. So whereas this style would have, if they did all have conditional information, would have a question with several text fields, a question with several text fields, whereas this section will then take up much less space than these two styles, because they'll have their question and their conditional information nice and tight right there together with one another. And this is going to be much easier for you and your staff when you are exporting those fields to know what those additional questions are or where they're coming from, because if these all just say explain or please explain, and these options are cancer or diabetes or whatever the case may be, then it might be unclear as to which one the patient is answering or which one this text field might go to. So if you are going to do this style, I definitely recommend, if option 1 is cancer and option 2 is diabetes or something like that, then I would say type of cancer, type of diabetes, just so it's very clear as to which option that conditional information came from. But again, if you do have a section where you're collecting a lot of conditional information, I absolutely recommend setting that up as a single checkbox section or as a single select options section. All right. It does not look like we have any questions today, so that will conclude today's webinar, as I do apologize, but we are all out of time today. Very much appreciate you for being here, though. And just as a reminder, if you do have any staff or coworkers that would like to learn this information, or if it would benefit you for them to learn this information, please feel free to send them our way. We do encourage everyone to join us as often as they like, as these are all free. And another reminder, we do host the form building webinars every Tuesday and Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. We do host onboarding webinars as well, where we go through general use of the account, updating users, sending forms, and things like that. So please feel free to join us as we do these webinars every day. And if you would like to keep up with our webinar schedule, you can do so by going to My Account, Support, and search guide. This will take you to our product guide, where we'll have many articles that can answer many of your questions, especially if you're just getting started with the product or just getting started with the form builder. We do have articles about all of our different widgets. So please feel free to come through our guide, as it can answer most questions that come through. And if you would like to keep up with our webinar schedule, that can be found in product updates. We can click on product updates, and we'll have our recent feature releases on the right side and our webinar schedules on the left. We can click on the June webinar schedule, for instance, and we'll have our onboarding schedule up top. If you're interested in signing up for one of those dates, you'll just need to click on the date. It will take you right to that sign up page. The onboarding schedule won't change too much in terms of what information we go over, although we do focus the Wednesday onboarding schedule to some of our new features, such as the synced forms and documents. So please keep that in mind. And then our form building schedule can be found at the bottom of the page. These will be different from day to day, so please feel free to come here and see what we'll be going over on a specific day. And if you are interested, again, just clicking on that title will take you right to the sign up page. And then if you are interested in going back through watching any of the previous ones, we do post these after the fact as well. So if there is something that you're interested in joining us for, or interested in learning about, I should say, but won't be able to be in attendance, don't worry, we will be posting that recording later on. So just keep an eye on this page. We'll have that up for you. And then once it's posted, it will change to this title, posted, click here. You can click that link. It will take you right to our YouTube channel. We'll have some timestamps at the bottom of those videos for you as well. But I definitely recommend going back through our previous webinars, we did a different theme in each month. So if you're just getting started in the Builder, the March and February webinars are going to be very helpful for you. As in the March webinar, we went over all of the widgets in the Builder. February was all about adding and creating new forms. And then April and May were about updating and editing existing forms. And June is all about formatting. But all right. Well, thank you very much again. We do appreciate you joining us today and hope to see you again very soon. That will conclude us today. Have a great afternoon. Thank you very much.